Right, so have you ever heard that catchy Boney Emma song, Rasputin? Lover is a Russian queen, all that.
Oh, of course. Who hasn't? That's a classic.
It is, but how much truth is there to that, like, image of Rasputin, the mad monk, that's kind of swirling around out there in pop culture?
Well, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
You sent over like a whole bunch of sources about the real Grigori Rasputin. And I gotta say, this guy's way more complex than I think any disco song could ever really capture.
Then a disco song, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. It's really interesting.
it really is.
So today we're deep diving into these sources about Rasputin.
Yeah.
We're going to be trying to, separate fact from fiction, and we're going to try to understand his influence on the twilight of the Romanov dynasty.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
We're diving into this period of intense social change and political unrest in Russia.
Right.
And right there, smack dab in the middle of it all, is this enigmatic figure, Grigori Rasputin.
So mysterious, right? So let's start with the basics. Who was this guy?
Yeah.
The sources we're looking at today paint a picture of a Siberian peasant, not much formal education, maybe a little bit of a wild streak in his youth.
Yeah, there's definitely like an air of mystery surrounding his early years.
Right.
Some accounts even suggest that he like dabbled in horse theft.
Wow.
You know, right? But around 1897, he undergoes like this profound spiritual transformation.
Okay.
Yeah, he becomes a Stranic, which means holy wanderer.
A holy wanderer.
So picture him like traveling across Russia, seeking spiritual enlightenment, and gathering a following along the way.
So he wasn't a monk, though, right? Like in the traditional sense.
No, not officially affiliated with the Orthodox Church.
Oh, interesting.
But that outsider status probably just added to his mystique, you know?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you have to remember, this was a time when all these mystical and occult ideas were all the rage, especially among Russia's elite.
Right, yeah, it was a very different time.
Very different.
Okay, so we have this charismatic, self-proclaimed holy man wandering around Russia,
Right.
and somehow he ends up in St. Petersburg, the heart of the empire,
Yes.
rubbing shoulders with the Tsar and Tsarina themselves. How did that happen?
Well, St. Petersburg was this hub, of social and political activity.
Also works.
Rasputin arrives around the early 1900s.
Okay.
Just as Russia is grappling with all these like major changes,
Right.
industrialization is booming,
Yeah.
but it's creating these like huge inequalities.
Sure.
People are demanding reforms, but the Tsar and the ruling class are clinging to their power.
So it's kind of a powder keg ready to explode.
Exactly. And into this like volatile mix walks Rasputin, this figure who represents something completely different from the established order.
Right.
He's charismatic,
Yeah.
he's a bit of a rumble, and he claims to have this direct connection to God.
So it's this image, it's this reputation that leads him to the Romanov family.
Right.
By 1905, he's introduced to Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra.
Right.
And Alexandra in particular is drawn to him. She's deeply religious. She's desperate to find someone who can help her son, Alexei, who suffers from hemophilia.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand Alexandra's mindset here,
Right.
She's seeing her son suffer from this incurable illness. She's tried all the conventional treatments, and nothing seems to work.
Right.
So when she encounters Rasputin, this, charismatic figure who claims to have these healing powers,
Right.
she sees him as, a beacon of hope,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
And there are those accounts, whether you believe them or not,
right.
of Rasputin seemingly easing Alexei's pain.
Yeah, and whether it was through prayer, some kind of calming influence, or even, as some sources speculate, like a basic understanding of aspirin's effects, who knows? But the perception of miracles was powerful.
Sure.
It really, cemented Alexandra's faith in him.
So now he's not just some wandering mystic.
Right.
He's a close confidant of the Tsarina, whispering in her ear, potentially influencing decisions that could affect the entire empire.
Yeah, and this is where things get really complicated. As Rasputin's influence grows, so does the controversy surrounding him.
Of course.
He becomes this polarizing figure, dividing Russian society.
Well, you could just imagine how the established elite felt about this peasant suddenly having the Tsarina's ear.
Exactly. They saw him as a threat, a dangerous outsider who was upending the traditional power structure.
Right.
And all those rumors about his behavior didn't help.
Oh yeah, the rumors, right. Stories of debauchery, wild parties, inappropriate relationships with followers.
All of that, these stories, they swirled through St. Petersburg, further fueling the fire of the controversy.
Right.
And they were amplified by Rasputin's political opponents who saw an opportunity to discredit him and weaken the Tsarina's position.
So now we have this incredibly volatile situation.
Yeah.
A deeply divided society, a struggling empire on the brink of war,
Yes.
and right at the center of it all,
Yep.
Grigori Rasputin.
Grigori Rasputin.
This enigmatic figure who just seems to embody all the contradictions and anxieties of the age.
He does.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really something. Yeah, it's almost like something out of a Greek tragedy.
Yeah, it really
You
is.
have this man born into poverty,
Right.
and he rises to this position of immense influence only to be brought down by the very forces that propelled him to the top.
It's a classic tale,
Yeah.
ambition, intrigue, and
Yeah,
ultimately.
downfall, yeah.
But let's go back to those rumors for a second.
Okay.
Some of the stories about Rasputin are pretty wild.
Yeah, they are.
How do we separate fact from fiction?
Well, it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
You gotta remember that Rasputin was a controversial figure.
Right?
He had powerful enemies
Yeah.
who were very eager to spread negative stories about him.
Of course.
And those stories often mixed, truth with exaggeration and outright fabrication.
So our sources mention some pretty scandalous accusations, including allegations of, sexual impropriety, even involvement in occult rituals.
Right, and those accusations were used to paint him as this, dangerous threat to the moral fabric of society.
Yeah.
They played into existing anxieties about social change and religious upheaval.
So it was a way to discredit him and undermine his influence.
Absolutely. His enemies wanted to create a narrative that would turn public opinion against him.
Right.
They wanted to portray him as this corrupting influence on the Tsarina,
Yeah.
and by extension on the entire country.
And let's not forget, this is all happening against the backdrop of World War I.
Oh, that's right.
Russia is facing major setbacks on the battlefield. Public discontent is growing.
Right, and as the war dragged on,
Yeah.
Rasputin became a convenient scapegoat for Russia's problems.
Makes sense.
His critics blamed him for everything,
Wow.
from military defeats to food shortages.
Jeez.
They argued that his influence over the Tsarina was weakening the country's war effort.
So the stakes were incredibly high.
They were, and this brings us to a key figure in Rasputin's story.
Okay.
Prime Minister Pyotr Stolypin.
Okay.
Stolypin was a reformer who recognized the need for modernization in Russia.
Okay.
He saw Rasputin's influence as a major obstacle to progress.
And our sources mention that Stolypin tried to warn the Tsar about Rasputin's negative influence.
He did. He even launched investigations into Rasputin's activities,
Oh, wow.
hoping to find evidence that could be used to remove him from the royal court.
Uh-huh.
But ultimately, his efforts were unsuccessful.
Really?
The Tsarina's faith in Rasputin was unshakable.
It's fascinating how he managed to maintain such a hold over the Tsarina despite all the opposition and the controversy.
It speaks to his charisma and his ability to manipulate people's beliefs and emotions.
Sure.
He presented himself as this man of God,
Right.
A spiritual guide
Yeah.
who could offer comfort and solace in times of trouble.
Right.
And Alexandra, desperate to save her son and facing mountain pressure from all sides,
Yeah.
clung to him as her only hope.
So even as the situation in Russia deteriorated, even as the war dragged on,
Right.
public anger grew.
Yes.
Rasputin's position within the royal courts seemed unassailable.
At least for a time. But eventually, the forces arrayed against him would prove too powerful to resist.
Yeah.
The growing unrest, the political machinations, the whispers of conspiracy, it all culminated in that fateful night in December 1916.
The assassination.
Yeah,
It's a story that's become almost legendary.
it has.
This meticulously planned plot involving Prince Felix Yusupov, a member of the Tsar's own family, and a group of co-conspirators.
The details are still debated today.
Really?
But what we know is that Rasputin was lured to Yusupov's palace under false pretenses.
Wow.
He was given poisoned food and wine,
Uh-huh.
but to the assassin's astonishment,
Right.
it seemed to have little effect on him.
It adds to that whole image of him, right?
Right.
This almost superhuman figure.
Right, it probably fueled the belief that he possessed supernatural powers.
Right.
But even Rasputin, with his supposed invulnerability, couldn't withstand the assassin's determination.
Wow.
He was shot multiple times.
Oh, wow.
And finally, his body was dumped into the icy waters of the Neva River.
What a dramatic end. But did his death achieve what the assassins had hoped for? Did it stabilize the situation in Russia?
Sadly, no. In fact, it had the opposite effect.
Really?
Rasputin's murder further destabilized the already fragile political situation.
Oh, wow.
It removed a key figure from the royal court,
Uh-huh.
but it did nothing to address the underlying problems that were tearing Russia apart.
So it was a short-sighted solution that ultimately backfired.
In many ways, yes.
Yeah.
The assassination became a symbol of the violence and desperation that had gripped the country.
Wow.
It further eroded public trust in the monarchy,
Right?
and it created a vacuum that the revolutionaries would soon exploit.
So we have this incredible irony, Rasputin, this figure who represented the excesses and the corruption of the Tsarist regime,
Right.
becomes a martyr in death.
Yeah.
His assassination helps to pave the way for the very revolution that his enemies had hoped to prevent.
Exactly, and in the years that followed, his story would continue to evolve. where
Yeah.
it's taken on new meanings and interpretations. He would become this figure of fascination, a symbol of mystery and intrigue, inspiring countless books, films, and even that catchy Boney M song.
Yeah, it's amazing how his story continues to capture our imaginations even today.
It really is.
He's become this like larger-than-life figure, almost a mythical character.
It's that blend of history and mystery, I think, that keeps people coming back to Rasputin.
Right.
He embodies this idea of the outsider who rises to power.
Right.
The enigmatic figure who defies easy categorization.
And our sources even mention his daughter,
Oh, yeah.
Maria Rasputin, who had quite a life of her own. She emigrated after the revolution,
I know, yeah.
became a cabaret dancer, even a lion tamer.
It's almost like the Rasputin mystique continued through his daughter.
Yeah, it is.
She even wrote books about her father.
Really?
Trying to defend his reputation and present it as this, misunderstood, holy man.
It makes you wonder how much of Rasputin's image was carefully crafted, even during his lifetime.
It's a good question. He was certainly aware of his own image
Right.
and how to cultivate it.
Yeah.
He understood the power of symbolism, of presenting himself as this mysterious, almost otherworldly figure.
And that image has resonated through the years.
It has.
We see it in countless books, films, even that Boney M song.
Yeah.
It's like he's become this pop culture icon.
And those portrayals often focus on the more sensational aspects of his life.
Right.
The rumors of debauchery, the alleged hypnotic powers, the political intrigue.
Well, it makes for a good story, right?
Exactly, but it's important to remember that those portrayals are often filtered through the lens of entertainment,
Yeah.
They may not always be historically accurate, but they do reflect our enduring fascination with figures like Rasputin.
So how do we reconcile the historical Rasputin with the pop culture icon? How do we make sense of this complicated legacy?
I think it's about recognizing that history is always a matter of interpretation. There's no single definitive answer to the question of who Rasputin really was.
Right.
We're left with these fragments of evidence, these conflicting accounts.
Right.
And ultimately, it's up to each of us to piece together our own understanding.
And perhaps that's what makes him so compelling. He challenges us to think critically,
Right.
to question assumptions,
Yeah.
and to grapple with the complexities of human nature.
He also reminds us that history isn't just a collection of dry facts and dates.
No?
It's about people,
Right.
with all their flaws and contradictions, their ambitions and desires. And sometimes those individuals can become lightning rods for the anxieties and hopes of an entire society.
Rasputin certainly seems to fit that description.
He does.
He was a man of his time, but he also transcended his time.
Yes.
He became a symbol, an archetype that continues to resonate with us today.
And in a way, that's the ultimate testament to his enduring influence. Whether we see him as a villain, a saint, or something in between, he continues to provoke debate and inspire reflection.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Grigori Rasputin, I'm left with a sense of awe at the sheer complexity of the man and his story.
Yeah, me too.
It's a tale full of twists and turns, contradictions, ambiguities.
It is.
And ultimately, it leaves us with more questions than answers.
But that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It's an ongoing conversation, a process of discovery that never truly ends. And Rasputin, with all his enigma and intrigue,
Right.
will continue to be a part of that conversation for generations to come.
Absolutely. Well said. And with that, we come to the end of another deep dive.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to the past.
Of course.
We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of Grigori Rasputin, a man who continues to fascinate and intrigue us over a century after his death.